interviewed on a podcast for Empowered Mortgages. Their host, Martin James, you might recognise him. He's a TV celebrity. He's often on the Times radio as well and lots of other places as well. Well, he interviewed me about how to add value to a property, how to increase the value of your property if you're looking to sell it. I also go into a deep dive on how I got started in property. So it talks about my story. It talks about my alcoholic mother not having a father and how I actually decided to become a property investor. So you might find it interesting. And what I'm also going to do is in the first comment, I'm going to pin a link so you can subscribe to their channel. I'll be on their channel again in the future, and they've got some great guests on there as well. So do subscribe in the first comment below and watch this video. Comment below with any questions, thoughts or observations. Enjoy the content.
Welcome to On the House, where we take mortgages and make them as simple as possible so you don't have anything to worry about when buying or selling your dream home. Now, for the final episode of this season, I'm thrilled to say that we have James Nicholson, the founder of Property Accelerator and Property Investment Specialist Extraordinaire, which is handy because in this particular episode, we're going to be talking about selling your property, everything you need to know from tidying up to what the buyer wants. James, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I'm fascinated by your story, but I'm just going to ask you to tell me a little bit about how you got into property and how you came to be here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, I started investing quite a while ago in 1999. And at the time, it was more out of necessity. So I come from a single parent background. My mum, unfortunately, has a lot of mental health issues. And I always had a fear that I don't have any kind of backup, which some people are fortunate to have. Maybe they've got parents that can support them. And I didn't really have that. So for me, I was always looking at how can I make money. So quite young, I left home. I left home at 16 and the council helped me get a property, which is a little harder to do these days. Yeah. But back then it was possible. And I went out and I went to college. I was doing a chefing course, and on the side, I was working in Burger King and became a Burger King manager at 16, which at the time
at 16
was the youngest in the UK, which I was quite impressed about. And it was a good, fun job, but didn't really pay well enough. So moved into recruitment at 17, which was commission-based, and really where I started to learn about sales, which was a skill that I found very useful over the years. And when I was 18, I was fortunate enough to be able to buy a studio flat in Dorking in Surrey. And I lived there for probably about 15 years in a tiny little bedroom. And nowhere to really hide. But it was what got me onto the property ladder. And after that, I always had the belief that in order to get a second property, which I wanted to do, to get a buy-to-let, I felt that you had to then save the deposit. And the deposit on a buy-to-let, I'm sure your viewers know this, is considerably more than on a residential. 25% normally is what you would be looking at. But what I discovered was that you could actually increase the value of your property, which we'll talk about at some point, I'm sure, today. And by doing that, your value would go up, and you could do something called releasing equity, which people often do to get them started. And that's really how I started in property, was by adding value to properties and taking them forward.
So what I find fascinating about your story as well is I think sometimes when people hear about, investing in property and what you do now, they assume that you've just come from a background where someone's helped you onto the ladder. You left home at 16 and you've had to do all of this by yourself.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of people have that support, but most don't. And then a lot of people feel you can't get on the property ladder because of that. But there are creative ways that you can do that. You can get people to support you, and you can get a sideline job. You can set up a business. There's different ways. Obviously, you've got to reduce your outgoings to be able to save for deposit. But over time, you can do that. And by increasing the value of your property is really, really the key to getting your next deposit to buy another property. I've only saved one deposit, and that was my first property. I'm terrible at saving.
Yeah, me too.
If I had an option to go on holiday to Asia or to Vegas or something like that, I would much rather do that than save money. And I'm really bad at saving. But I built a decent portfolio by improving the value of the property and time as well. Time in the market, not timing the market, but time in the market is good as well, because property is one of those assets that 99.9% of the time, over time, it's going to go up in value. And that's really what helped me get extra deposits to buy more properties. So, yeah, that's how.
Well, I think it's a really inspirational tale. And I think, you know, a lot of people just assume that those people who become successful have done it through the means of help from family. And actually knowing that you've worked hard and you found a way to do this, and actually a very straightforward way, is actually really encouraging. I have so many questions for you, James.
Okay.
But let's stick to the brief. Okay, so today we're talking about selling a property. Now,
sure.
We live in volatile times, and it's been very difficult to kind of predict what's going on with the housing market. People are predicting crashes. Some people are saying the prices are still going up, but we're not sure if they are or not. If you were thinking about selling your property, is it worthwhile doing it now, or should you hold fire for a little bit?
I think there's always a buyer that would want your property. So I think there's lots of people that will watch your YouTube channel and my YouTube channel that will be in the comments saying, now's the time to sell or now's the time to buy. And there's lots of different opinions on that stuff. And I don't think either party is right or wrong. I think if you need to sell and you want to sell and you price correctly is the most important thing. So I think if you want to sell, you need to find a good agent. From my perspective, I prefer agents that own the estate agency. So I only, for my lettings, I don't deal with any huge corporate companies. I always deal with the local independent agent where I can speak to the owner and get the good service. And if you want to sell, I think that's important as well, because I feel they know the market locally better than anybody else. If you go to one of these big corporate companies, what I find often is that they can go through so many staff, they don't really know what's going on in the market. They get their corporate training on how to value and stuff like that. But I think that getting that local knowledge is very important, and having that local expert help you will sell in any market. So I think you can sell now and you can get good money, but I think you need to pick the right agent in order to help you get that moving.
And look for the personal touch as well, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and someone that owns that business has more pride and will want to do a good job for you. And if you can speak to that person and get to know them, I think you'll get the result that you want. So yes, you can sell at the moment.
So how do you know when it comes to your property being valued, if you're getting a good valuation or not? Do you get more than one?
Yes. I would always look at various different sources. So I would do my own research first and foremost to get a gut feel what the market is. So there's lots of data on Rightmove that can show you the sold price. It's important that you look at the sold price, not the listed price.
Right.
So if you look at house price data, we look at every month, I look at the nationwide data, the Nationwide Building Society and the Halifax. And we look at the Office of National Statistics, their data as well. Those numbers are significantly lower than the Rightmove asking price. There's always this big change in that. And what you've got to look at is what actually was the sold price. So look up on Rightmove what the sold is. Zoopla is actually a lot easier to do that as well. Look at what was the sold price is. You just put in your postcode and find a comparable and be honest with yourself. Because we all want to get the highest price. So you might have a 2-bedroom house, we're filming this in Guildford, you might have a 2-bedroom house down the road in Guildford, and you'll see one sold for 500 grand and one sold for 400 grand. You, in your heart, want that 500, right? You're desperate for 500.
That money in your hand.
Yeah, already. Yeah, if one person's got 500, I'm going to get 500. But what you've got to be realistic about is look at, okay, my one does need a little bit of work, or it's actually quite far from the station, so I'm closer to the 400. And then obviously when you get a broker, it's the first step, and then you'll get your lender, their valuer will come round, and if it matches up to what your gut was telling you from that data, and also speak to an agent, what they feel that would get. If they're fairly similar, then you can be confident that that's what you could achieve. But sometimes the valuer does get it really wrong. And in that scenario, you can challenge and you can go back to a valuer and you can say, this isn't quite right. I feel that because of this property I found and this property I found, you've got to give them some evidence, right?
Yeah.
And they sometimes do change their mind. But it's not, it's a rare scenario that happens. So the research prior is more important. So check Zoopla, check with agents and see what their expectations are.
Now, when it comes to the actual house itself, so I've got a terrible collection of Franklin Mint plates.
Right.
Do I need to bag them up and hide them, and paint the walls white?
I would, yeah. I would make it neutral. I think a neutral property, so everyone that views it can visualize what they like. So if it's in your style, unfortunately, it's only going to appeal to people that like a property like you do. So my partner, Katie, can't see through this stuff. So when we look at houses together, I look at it and say, this is a mess. This is brilliant. That's what I want. I want something that I can add value to. Yeah. And she wants the finished article. And so she can't, in her head, get around the fact that we need to do some work. It's just not a thing to her. She's like, it should be done already. So if you can make it neutral, then a Katie in that scenario could see, okay, I don't have to do too much here. I'm just going to do a little bit. But if you've got pink walls or black walls I've seen in places, then it's good for me as a buyer, but not good for you as a seller.
This is forever going to be known as the rule of Katie. In all of my articles.
I know when she watches this, she'll be like, oh, how dare you say that?
Because I'm the same. It's that I can't visualise the finish.
A lot of people can't. Most people can't.
I mean, this must be really worthwhile doing though, because in a sense, you're saying that actually those properties that need work, you're going to get more of a bargain because once they get done up, they're going to increase in value. Yeah,
if there's a mess, if there's strange colours or all of this kind of stuff, as a buyer, that's what I'm looking for. When I'm looking on Rightmove as a buyer rather than the seller, I'm looking for these properties that have these problems, perceived problems.
Yeah.
Because that's when I can negotiate better. So for a seller, because obviously that's what we're talking about here, that's when you're going to get less viewings and you're going to get beaten up on price by a property investor.
So I'm selling my property, but I'm in no massive rush.
Yeah.
What are the things that I can do to the property to actually increase its value? Because there are lots of urban myths about this kind of thing, aren't there?
Yeah. Things like baking bread and stuff like that. And roasting some coffee is one that people talk about. But yeah, I think first and foremost is declutter, get rid of the clutter, make it look presentable. So rather than getting an estate agent round, if you've got a lick of paint that you can do, just quickly get that done. Like that's not going to be a big problem. But how you can really add value to property and where I've made money adding value is if you can add any extra bedrooms, like that makes a lot of money. I had a flat in Dorking that was a 1-bedroom. The living room was 50 feet, which was huge. I mean, normally you're looking at 15 feet by 15 feet. It was as long as the room we're in now, which obviously people can't see here, but it was huge. And adding an extra bedroom cost about $5,000 for me in that scenario and added £50,000 in value straight away.
That's
and that was easy.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
That much money.
And it took weeks to do. And you're not always going to get that option and that lucky. Some places they've already added the rooms in. But first and foremost, if you want to add value, adding bedrooms is the fastest way, in my opinion, to add value without going to extensions and stuff like that, which can get more complicated and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And is it worthwhile getting your kitchen redone? Because I know lots of people who've just had totally new kitchens torn out when they've moved into.
Yeah, I think it is worth having a good kitchen, but everyone that I speak to overspends on a kitchen. So I bought my daughter Georgia a property in Doncaster, and none of my friends believe me that I got a kitchen for £1,500, and they all think I'm lying. I could show
actually. Yeah, convince me.
But you just go to B&Q or somewhere like that, and you get the cheaper units from the back boxes and get slightly better doors, not the most expensive doors, not the cheapest doors.
Yeah.
And you just find a local carpenter to fit it rather than a kitchen fitting company, because the price seems to jump up. And don't buy all of the extra trims and everything like that, but a clean kitchen. It doesn't have to be necessarily brand new. So you could also take a kitchen unit and swap the doors out. Something like that could make a massive difference to it. And so it's just visually, when someone walks in, they're like, yeah, this is good. And you're right, they might rip it all out and put it in a bin as soon as they
lost 1,500 quid.
Yeah. But some people that invest in property, this house in Doncaster was 60 grand. So you can't spend 20 grand on a kitchen in a 60 grand house. It just doesn't work. But some people would do that. And so they would spend maybe 10 grand on that kitchen. And then there's no way to increase the value.
Yeah.
There's a ceiling in some areas on this is the maximum price. So you might have to do some grunt work yourself. You might have to get rid of some of the rubbish. I've taken baths to the dump many times.
Yeah. And you traded your boiler if it's worth any money.
Yeah, exactly. But it does make a difference when you walk in a new kitchen and paint. It just, the smell, it just gives people a little bit more confidence. So
if I've got neighbours who say got a messy garden and I can't force them to change it, can I pop round and ask them if I can work with them to tidy it?
I have done stuff like that before, yeah. And so you're right, you can't pick your neighbours, like you can't pick your family, and you're kind of lumbered with what you get. And sometimes it is going to be difficult if you've got someone that's got a scrapped car out the front or sofas out there. And yeah, it can be worth building that relationship with them rather than being aggressive, which a lot of people go straight in with. You need to move this and you need to do that. That gets people's back up. Offer them some support. Say, look, I'm trying to sell this property. Could we do something together to help you? Like, I'm willing to put a few quid into it. Would it help you if I took away that cooker that you've got in the front or the sofa you've got? Or would it help you if I cut your grass?
Yeah.
These sorts of things, if you do it in a civil way, work better. And I've had scenarios where people have clashed with me or I've clashed with people because we're just tired of not getting things resolved and it never works.
Yep.
And then that problem lasts for a long period of time. And then they might be difficult when people are viewing the property. They could be loud or cause a problem. And maybe the viewer goes and talks to them. What's this neighbour like? And they're not particularly positive about it. So always, always, always try and have a good relationship with anyone in your block, if it's a block, or neighbours. Like, it's important.
Yeah, I'm a great believer in popping around with a cake every now and then. But
Exactly.
no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, do that maybe a few weeks before you're going to ask the question,
exactly.
right?
Allow some lead-in time.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think it's important.
So what if I'm selling a property? What are the kind of things that I need to disclose? I'm not talking about nasty neighbours here, but what do I need to explain about my property? What legally do I have to tell people about?
I mean, that stuff I would definitely go with a solicitor and get your legal requirements, because they can change. So legislation is changing all the time. We've got new government now, and they are really focused on lots of new legislation like leasehold reform, renters' rights. However, if you know of something that could slow down the purchase, so on that Doncaster property, there is something called a chancel repair, which means that that property, if the local church needs any repairs, needs a new roof, legally, from a rule that's hundreds of years old, you could have to pay that. Yeah. Now, I bought that property in auction. I never have even heard of chancel repair, and it worried me a little bit. And the way my solicitor talked about it, he said, sometimes your solicitor can talk you out of things because they say, this is going to happen and this is going to happen and this is going to happen. You could pay for the church and you could pay for new stained glass windows if they want it. And that took 15 minutes. But the solution was an insurance policy, which was £30 for life once. Not £30 a year, £30 for life. You have to pay this chancel repair insurance and then you never pay it again. And so if you're the seller and you know that's going to happen because it happened when you purchased that property, then just tell people up front. If you just said that, then because somebody might come across this, they might be Googling some stuff, they might be looking up stuff on the property. You can find so much information about property online, and they might come across and it might say there's a chancel repair liability here, and if the church needs a new roof, you're going to have to pay for it. If you're the seller, tell those people this is a thing, you pay 15 quid, 30 quid, or whatever it is, and you never pay for it again in your life. It's nothing to worry about. So bringing these things forward is really important. Or there could be planning, for example. So I looked at some flats recently in Dorking, and there's planning for a huge block of flats behind near Dorking Station. And so that actually isn't going to happen. That build got stopped, the planning lapsed, and it isn't something that's going to happen, but it was something that I became aware of in the purchase. So just address it up front, because all the solicitors are going to bring this stuff up.
Yeah.
So it's going to come up anyway. So if you bring it up with the estate agent, they're going to be good at sales anyway. So they're going to manage it for you and deal with the expectation. Yeah, don't hide stuff. Like, that's the last thing you want. If it comes up, it always comes up at the end of the sale, when you're just about to complete, and that could lose you the deal. So it's important to be upfront, I would say.
That's such a good tip. Now, just listening to you, and as a property investor, I think it's fascinating. And I've watched your YouTube videos, which are amazing, by the way, as have many thousands of other people. If people want to get into property investing, if they want to kind of look into kind of making the most out of their purchases, what's your checklist? Maybe not just for them, I suppose for anyone buying a property. What are the key things that you're looking for when you're trying to find a property to invest in?
Yeah, great question. So I only buy ugly houses. So the uglier, the better. So if you invest in, not that many people could, in Chelsea and Kensington, it's very hard to add any value to those properties. They're all going to be probably immaculate, and they're going to be at tippity top prices. You want to buy the ugliest house in each city or town, and that has the ability to add value to it. So I will always look for a property where ideally I can add bedrooms, and I'm not interested, some people are, it's not my strategy, to do extensions and that kind of stuff. I want to keep it in the four walls that I've got. So if I can take a 2-bed to a 3-bed, that's a win for me. And so you would get used to looking for properties that you can add value to, and you can see the floor layout on Rightmove. You don't even have to do the viewing. So get a little bit of property education. Don't need to spend thousands. Just read some books, or do some courses, or go to some seminars, or go to some networking meetings, and just get that education so you can really understand, how can I add value? And the value, like we talked about kitchen, you don't need to spend 10 grand on a kitchen when you can spend £1,500. It just needs to be affordable. It needs to be something that can really increase the use and give more people more options. So more people want a 3-bed house than a 2-bed house, because they've got 2 children, or they want to, or whatever scenario they're in there. So that's what I always look at it. You have to be able to add value. Adding bedrooms, updating kitchens and bathrooms is probably the easiest one. And just things like a lick of paint, it can cost almost nothing. Like a massive tub of paint from Wix, which unfortunately I've done too many times, is like 30 quid. And that can do a lot of rooms with that.
I think I bought that too.
Yeah. Or just pay someone to do it. But there's lots of things that don't cost lots of money. People believe that carpets cost lots of money. You can get up north in Doncaster, we did a whole house for 650 quid, a 3-bed house, carpet, with decent quality carpet. And so things can be done at an affordable rate. So doing stuff yourself is important, but only buy properties you can really add value to.
Well, I can't think of any better advice, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's so helpful. Thank you so much for joining me on the show. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
If you want to know more about all of our free mortgage guides on everything you need to know about homes, buying them, selling them, and learning to love them, then watch this space.